I'm Randy and I make candy, and today I'm going to try not to lose my temper. Stick around. Greetings, my confectionery compadres, and welcome to Randy Makes Candy, where I help you make tasty treats that people love to eat. Over the past few months, we've made a lot of tasty treats here in the Candy Kitchen, and most of them use chocolate as an ingredient. But we've never really talked about chocolate, even though the type of chocolate we use and how we treat it is crucial to the success of our endeavors. Well, that changes today. We're going to talk about what chocolate's made of, the science behind its behavior under different conditions, and how we can use that knowledge to make better candy. As always, I'd love to hear about your results if you decide to temper your own chocolate, as well as suggestions for what you'd like to see in future videos. Now, to keep this episode from going too long, I'm not going to talk about the process of going from cacao plant to chocolate, but it really is fascinating. I'll put a link in the description for those of you who'd like to know more. Okay, let's talk chocolate. As I'm sure you're aware, there are three main categories of chocolate: dark, milk, and white. Dark chocolate consists of chocolate liquor, which is finely ground cacao beans, cocoa butter, which also results from grinding cacao beans, lecithin, an emulsifier used to give chocolate that silky smooth mouthfeel, sugar, and vanilla. Milk chocolate has all the above plus milk fats and milk solids. White chocolate contains everything milk chocolate does except chocolate liquor. By the way, there's no alcohol in chocolate liquor. So that's chocolate, but there's also chocolate. Compound chocolate, aka coating chocolate, melting chocolate, or confectionery coating, contains little to no cocoa butter. Instead, it contains something like soybean oil or coconut oil. This means it can't legally be labeled as chocolate. Instead, it's described as chocolatey or chocolate flavored. The upside of this is that it's easier to work with, as there's no need to temper it. But what you gain in convenience, you lose in flavor and texture. For everyday, run-of-the-mill kinds of treats, there's really nothing wrong with compound chocolate, which is why we've used a lot of it here in the Candy Kitchen. But for special occasions, I'm going to recommend real chocolate, which means tempering. Or does it? I actually haven't done much of the way of tempering, so I'm going to be learning right alongside you here. Get ready, here comes the science. You're all familiar with crystallization, ice crystals, salt crystals. Well, cocoa butter has crystals too. In fact, it's a 6-phase polymorphic crystal, meaning that it can form into any of 6 different crystal formations. They have cool Greek designations, but for the sake of this discussion, let's just call them types 1 through 6. Types 1 through 3 are formed when melted chocolate cools too quickly. They're characterized by a soft, crumbly texture, discoloration, and a melting point far below body temperature. Type 4 is formed when melted chocolate is allowed to slowly cool at room temperature. It's firm, but doesn't have that crisp snap of properly tempered chocolate. It's also prone to discoloration and also has a melting point far below body temperature. Type 5 is produced by bringing the chocolate to a series of precisely measured temperatures. This process is known as tempering. This is the strongest and most stable of the crystals. It's smooth and shiny in appearance, snaps when bitten or broken, and melts quickly in your mouth but slowly in your hand. This is the desired type of crystal. Type 6 is produced only by allowing type 5 to rest at room temperature for many months. It's hard, resists melting, and may show signs of discoloration. You might find this in some very old candy. So we want type 5 crystals, but no others. How do we make this happen? As you may have guessed from my description of tempering, each crystal type melts at a different temperature. We're going to use that to our advantage. Here you can see the melting point for each type. Let me show you a representation of what we want to do. You can see here that each type of crystal is represented by a different piece of hardware. To the best of my knowledge, this is not actually what the crystals look like. You can tell just by looking at them that no matter how hard we try, we can't arrange these crystals into a cohesive crystalline structure. So we're going to raise the temperature until everything melts, no crystals. Theoretically, you could just raise the temperature to about 88 or 90 degrees, high enough to melt 1 through 4 but not melt 5, but you'd have to be very patient. I gave it a try, and after 48 hours at 91 degrees Fahrenheit, the chocolate was just beginning to melt. So the best bet is to raise the temperature somewhere between 100 and 118 degrees. Chocolate begins to burn at 120, so we want to stay below that. In this example, the sheet metal represents melted chocolate. Then we let the chocolate cool to 80 degrees until just type 4 and 5 crystals appear. It might seem like it would make more sense to stop cooling the chocolate before the type 4 crystals formed, but the type 5s form very slowly in that range. It's better to go down to 80 than come back up to 88 to melt the type 4, so we're left with nothing but the lovely and desirable type 5. Look how nicely they fit together. That's some good-looking, well-tempered chocolate right there. So my plan was to melt some chocolate in batches, then try a different tempering technique on each batch to see what works the best, while still being accessible to the home confectioner. I added that last bit because you can buy tempering machines that make things quite easy. They heat, cool, agitate, and cost hundreds or thousands of dollars, so probably not suited for the home chocolatier. Originally, I was going to walk you through each step of the process, showing the results of each test and comparing them along the way, but the more tests I did, the more tests I wanted to do, until I realized that I was well on my way to making an hour-long video that would be quite repetitive and kind of boring. So the new plan is to do a quick overview of the testing, what the results were, and we're going to finish by dipping some stuff in chocolate to see how it turns out. Here we go. I used two different chocolates. The first was Calabaut chocolate, which is the real deal. This is the ingredient used worldwide by professional chocolatiers. The second was Guittard baking chips that I bought at our local Albertsons. They're about half the price of the Calabaut, but come highly recommended. I used both a Sous vide and a microwave to melt the Calabaut chocolates. For those of you unfamiliar with Sous vide, it's basically a water bath in which you can regulate the temperature within very tight tolerances. I've linked below to an article on tempering using Sous vide. For the Guittard, I used the microwave and two different seeding methods. When seeding chocolate, you start by melting it so that there's no crystals. You then add tempered chocolate. The type 5 crystals in the tempered chocolate are the seed that stimulates the formation of more type 5 crystals in the melted chocolate. As I said earlier, we want our chocolate to be smooth and shiny in appearance. We want it to snap, we want it to have a high melting point, and obviously we want it to taste good. So after the chocolate was tempered, or not, those were the things I tested. The results of the Calabaut test were quite surprising. The chocolate tempered in the sous vide produced the results expected, but it was closely followed by the chocolate that wasn't tempered at all, just heated to 118 degrees Fahrenheit, poured into the mold, and left to sit on the counter. The test of the Guittard baking chips was pretty much as I had expected. The best results came from heating about 3/4 of the chocolate to somewhere between 115 and 118 degrees Fahrenheit, then adding the remaining chips, the seeds, and stirring until the temperature dropped to just below 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Guittard chips melted in the microwave and left to cool at room temperature, in other words untempered, totally unlike the tempered Guittard. Very streaky, a lot of bloom, would not recommend. So for the final test, I'll use tempered Guittard and both tempered and untempered Calabaut, show you the results, and then use each to dip a marshmallow that I made in last week's episode, along with a slice of banana. First is the untempered Calabaut chocolate. Followed by the Guittard chocolate that was tempered in the microwave using the seeding method. And finally, the Calabaut chocolate tempered in the Sous vide. You may have noticed that the tempered baking chips had a much thicker consistency than the Calabaut. That's fine for molding, but not great for dipping. Thickness is determined by the ratio of cocoa solids, cocoa butter, and other ingredients, so I think Guittard is just thicker by nature. Maybe I'll do a chocolate chip showdown someday and see which chips are best for dipping. The nice thing about tempering is that you get more than one shot at it. If it doesn't work, you can remelt the chocolate and start over. That's not the case, however, if you get water in your chocolate. Water will cause your chocolate to seize. It's chocolate's kryptonite. As Mrs. Randy Makes Candy says, it's like getting water in your gas tank. Very no bueno. Keep water away from your chocolate, which means you got to be really careful when doing sous vide. Final results: Calabaut melted at 118 in the sous vide and left to cool at room temp. Very nice, strangely enough. Has a nice sheen to it, doesn't melt in my hand. Calabaut tempered in the sous vide and left to cool at room temperature. Looks exactly like the untempered Calabaut, surprisingly enough. Guittard chips melted to 118 in the microwave and seeded with additional chips. Very similar in appearance to the Calabaut. Maybe a little more shine, kind of in between color of the other two. So yeah, at this point, untempered Calabaut is just as good as tempered, which is fine with me because tempering is a pain in the neck. But this goes against everything I was led to believe. As time goes on, we'll see if anything changes. All that's left is the tasting. First the Calabaut, then the Guittard. Let's do the banana. Slancheva. The flavors are quite similar. The Calabaut is 51.1% cacao and the Guittard 46%. I like the flavor of the Calabaut just a little more. Maybe that 5.1% makes a difference. It's also a little bit creamier. The big difference is not in the final product, but in the working consistency. The Calabaut is much thinner, which makes it better suited for dipping and molding, especially molds with a lot of detail. But you could certainly make the Guittard work, I think. It would absolutely work if you wanted a thick coating of chocolate, like maybe on a pretzel rod. The Calabaut costs twice as much as the Guittard. Is it twice as good? I really don't think so. Will I buy it again? I'll let you know when my 5-pound bag is empty. Thanks for sticking around, and I hope you'll join me next time. Dark chocolate consists of chocolate liquor, which is finely ground little to no cocoa butter. Instead, it contains insane. It's firm, does it? But then we let the chocolate